week, you saw part one of our interview with Mr. Frank Basile, philanthropist, huge supporter of the arts, world traveler, and the list goes on. And right? And guess what? You're going to see part two. It's coming up.
Let's jump in.
We hope you enjoy it.
In doing
Show
the
your
writing.
book. You brought one of your books.
Yes, and I brought our travel book.
I have that one.
Yes, Traveling with Frank and Katrina.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
There's
now,
a,
Oh, wow. Look at
this is not your typical travel book
Right,
that shows the places to visit and all of this, because you can go on Google and get all of that.
That's right.
This is our personal experiences. And they're kind of interesting because we travel on the edge.
Can you tell that kayak story?
Yes, and that story is in the book.
I know it is.
Yes, and that is one of the things that happens when you travel on your own without having a tour guide as the intermediary. And you can run into a lot of difficult situations, but then again, it helps you to get close to the people, to the culture, and so on. And it's well worth it. And as Katrina says so often, and it gives you another story to tell with all of these things that occur. To give you a flavor of some of the things, just like you just mentioned, I start out the book by talking about what we do and some of the experiences that we've had traveling on the edge, so to speak. Awakening in the Cairo Hilton when the bed started shaking from an earthquake. Taking a risky overnight bus trip from Sarajevo to Kosovo during the war there. And I might mention about a war, when we were going from Macedonia to Albania, there was a war going on, and when we got to the border in Macedonia, they said they have no one to take us to Albania. No buses, no taxis, no transportation. No one would risk it. I said, how do we get to Albania? He said, you can walk. I said, how far is it, the border? He said, about 2 kilometers. I turned to Katrina, we put our backpacks on, and here these two old people walked 2 kilometers into Albania. And the guards at the Albanian border looked at us as if we were coming out of space or something. What are these two old people doing walking over here? Don't they know that there's a war going on and so on? But fortunately, before I left, I had pulled some strings and was able to get a couple of visas for us to get into Albania. So they let us in, and I said, you have transportation going into town? He laughed. He said, no. And so I saw a guy who was working on a truck a few yards away, and I went over and I said, would you take us into town? I'll pay you. He looked at us and he said, sure.
Yeah.
And so he took us into the center of town. We saw a hotel there. We checked in. And that's what we do when we travel on our own. And had a wonderful time. But again, it was not scripted or anything like that. And we ran into some problems, but the problems gave us an opportunity to interact directly with the people.
Yeah,
we've taken trips where we have gone, for example, to Europe, and we booked a flight from the U.S. to a place in Europe, the return trip 10 days later back to the U.S., but nothing in between. So this way we were free to spend as much or little time in each place without having to affect the reservations ongoing. And then we would travel, and we never checked bags, so we weren't, had that problem. We could change planes and so on and so forth, and we could travel either by bus, by car, by train, plane, and so on to each place. And again, it was fun doing that type of thing. Again, but you ran into problems, just like I started mentioning here. The next thing I said was being caught in the middle of gunfire between the police SWAT team and the French separatist terrorists in Ajaccio, Corsica. We had no idea this was going on, and all of a sudden, the police, the SWAT team comes out and stops us. And they got guns drawn, and they said, what are you doing here? We didn't know. Nobody was guiding us. Being questioned and almost denied permission to board a flight from Amsterdam to Detroit in November '01 because our passports contained stamps from Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan from trips earlier that year. And that was after the problems that we had here in the U.S., in New York and so on. And again, we had to think of how we were going to get by that. We finally did, but I won't go into all of that detail. The tour director in Tibet explaining that the peace monument we were looking at was erected to celebrate Tibet's, listen to this, liberation from the Chinese.
And you were there?
And by the Chinese, and of course they weren't liberated. And so I asked the tour guide, I said, how can you say things like this?
That's right, Tibet was not liberated.
He said,
right?
I say this because the government tells me to say this.
That's right.
And if I said anything else, I would get fired or shot.
Or worse.
Wow.
Or worse, that's
Yeah.
right. And being on a small Russian icebreaker cutting through the frigid waters in Antarctica. This was after our marriage, Katrina and I's marriage in Las Vegas. We went on a trip to Antarctica. In the first 2 or 3 days, we couldn't even stand up. The boat was so rocky going through it. And they only had 100 passengers because we wanted to go on land there and not just look at it from a distance. Mm-hmm. So you do that when you take a small icebreaker to do that. And then we said being searched by AK-47 rifle-carrying Colombian police who wanted to know if we were carrying more than $10,000 in cash while dogs were sniffing our luggage. And of course, they need to be careful about it. And so they wanted to make sure we weren't smuggling, we weren't going there to get drugs or whatever. Mm-hmm. And this is interesting, fearing for our lives when our pilot, who was making a third attempt to land at the airport in Asunción, Paraguay, in bad weather, assured the passengers, this landing is within the capabilities of the crew and equipment. Now, when they find it necessary to tell passengers that we can do this, you begin to wonder.
Yeah.
And at that point, I turned to Katrina and I said, you didn't know this, and I don't know if we're going to make it, but I need to tell you that I was advised that there's no American planes that are scheduled to fly into Asunción because they don't meet FAA standards. But I wanted to go, so I booked this flight. And I said, so if we don't make it, it's my fault. And I wanted to
she said,
confess.
thanks for telling me now.
At least I'm aware.
Thanks.
But I wanted to go. And then spending the night in the Newark airport, we slept in the chapel.
Oh, I remember
flight-
that story.
Yes, the flight was canceled, and so we stayed in a chapel because it was so crowded in there, and there were no hotels that were available in the area. Mm-hmm. So we slept in the chapel. Then it worked out great. Being advised upon our arrival in Kathmandu, Nepal, at the start of our vacation, that the American Information Agency had been bombed the day before by Maoist terrorists, and all non-essential Americans at the embassy had been evacuated from the country. And our tour guide said, but I've booked reservations immediately for you to go back to the U.S. I said, cancel them. We're staying here. He said, you're staying here? I said, yes. And it was a great decision. Again, it was a little dangerous. We ran into some people and this, that, and the other on the streets. But it was a great experience.
Those are some
in Kathmandu.
Crazy headlines. Those are
They're headlines.
Yeah, they
are headlines.
That's incredible.
Having 3 menacing-looking policemen suddenly closing in around me for taking a photo of the presidential palace in the capital of Paraguay. I found out later that it was illegal to take a picture of the capital, and you could be arrested. And these guys, in matter of fact, they confiscated at that time it was film.
Yeah, the film.
Yeah, they confiscated the film, so we couldn't show it to anybody.
All right.
I mean, it is really weird being turned away by the police when driving to Portofino on the Italian Riviera because the town was temporarily closed due to the number of cars in town. And the policeman said we needed to wait till some other cars left so you would have space to travel into Portofino.
That's actually not a bad idea.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's actually not a bad idea at all.
And then when we were in Cusco, Peru, to go to Machu Picchu, the main road to go there, they had mudslides, and we couldn't go there. And the guy said, you won't be able to go to Machu Picchu for 2 or 3 days. I said, we're only here for 1 day. how can we do it? He said, well, you could try and get a helicopter. He said, there's an old Army guy here who has an old helicopter. So I said, what's his name? So I called him, and he came out, and the helicopter had wires hanging from it. And so Katrina says, are we going to fly in that? I said, that's the only way we can get to Machu Picchu. So we did.
Oh, well, you made it.
Yeah, clearly.
Clearly they made it.
You're here. Oh my gosh.
And you had asked about the Zambezi River.
Well, you two had told us that story years ago.
Yes.
Years ago, and about how you basically almost perished
Yes.
in this kayaking
Yes. And again,
adventure.
we didn't have we didn't have tour guide or anything like that, but I happened to see on the internet that there was this tour that you could take on the river, but I didn't realize that there wouldn't be anybody driving the boat. It would be a small boat, and we would paddle. And we didn't know how to paddle and all of that stuff. So there we were, and there were hippopotamuses and everything else around. I mean, it was really quite risky to do this, but we finally made it through.
Yeah.
But I canceled the next trip because the next day I had scheduled to take a...
Bungee jumping. Were you guys going to go bungee jumping or something?
Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
The next trip.
Yes.
The next
you were
day
going
I
to
was
go
going
bungee jumping, and Katrina, I think Katrina was like,
Yes.
we're forgetting.
That's it.
That's one done.
Exactly. And it was over Victoria Falls.
Yes.
And we did cancel that one. So
Yeah.
But you do all of these things on your own, but you really get to experience the culture.
I was
the
going to say
locals.
the culture, and I think that's the best way to travel because when you're on tours, you're going to the typical tourist places.
Yes.
When you are on your own, and I've done this,
Yep.
you're meeting the people.
Yes.
You're speaking to the people. It really doesn't even matter if they speak English or not, because of course many of them don't.
Right.
But you have there is a way to communicate. There totally
Smiles
is.
Yes.
go a long
They're
way.
that's right, and polite and kindness. And I can tell you, I can tell you from my, travels, only because I've worked at places. I've been lucky enough because of my profession. Everybody's been really cool.
Yeah.
That I've
And
met.
in all these places, the people are the same. They respond to you the way you are to them. You're friendly, and they're also friendly.
That's right.
It's the governments that get in a way
And
frequently.
that's correct.
Yes,
That's what I found.
because we've found that in Iran, Saudi Arabia, Syria, all these other places, the people are so friendly. I can remember in Iran, these ladies with their headdress and everything were so happy to see Katrina because she was a blonde,
Well, the
and they knew
blonde.
and they all wanted their pictures taken with her. They didn't want the pictures taken with me, but they wanted them taken with her, and that's one of the ones that I sent in for this show that the audience will probably see.
Oh,
is
good.
a
Right about
picture-
this point?
yeah, Katrina with the other 6 local Iranians.
Right. We got to take a quick break. And then we're coming back with Mr. Frank Basile.
You have had such a broad appreciation of art, and I would like to hear what some of your most influential stories and backgrounds are on the topic.
Okay, good question. Well, years ago when we moved into the Overlook condominiums, we had hired an interior decorator to give us a plan. And I didn't especially like it. And during that time, as we frequently do, we visited some galleries. In this one particular gallery, I saw this piece that jumped out at me. And it was by a Rick Hoheimer, who's a painter in Bloomington. And it was an original acrylic 36 by 66 of a jazz band and ballroom dancers. And I looked at that and I said, we're going to put that in our main room, and we are going to decorate with art instead of using this decorating plan. And we came up with 4 or 5 themes. Jazz, I'm from New Orleans. Ballroom dance, our hobby. Sensuous, for obvious reasons. 1950s. And some with seagulls because in my speaking, I've based a lot of things on Jonathan Livingston Seagull, a book.
Yeah, I have that book.
Yeah, with that eagle. Yes, that was
I have
the
that
original
book.
book that started all of my motivational speaking and things like that. So
Huge.
that motivated me to do that. So we started here locally because I believe in helping to support local artists.
Local.
And we got as many as we could here to fit in with the theme, and then we went to Chicago, Beverly Hills, Miami, so on, and around the world. And all of the travels that we did, we were on the lookout for art that could fit in to these themes that we had to decorate that condo. One particular one, again, created a big difference. It was by a guy named Jacques Bachelier, a French artist, and it was a stunning hanging piece of glass art in the shape of a horn with New Orleans information on it. It was so beautiful. We bought it on the spot. And on the way home, I said, where are we going to hang it? And Katrina says, we don't have a place to hang it. It belongs on a window overlooking a lake. I said, we're not on a lake. She said, not yet.
I knew that was coming.
That weekend, we drove out to Geist. We looked around. We found the ideal place. We bought it, and that piece hung on the lake. We may be the only people who have bought a house to go with a piece of art.
That is cool.
But it was the perfect place for it.
You have, and real quick, because we unfortunately we have to wrap this up. But
Yeah.
because as always, you're so interesting. You guys really got into ballroom dancing big time,
Yes.
and you actually have a ballroom dance floor in your condominium.
In a jukebox, yes.
Yes, because I've been there, and
Yes.
and it's not huge, but you do have a ballroom floor. And an area for you guys to practice your ballroom
Yes.
dancing.
Yes.
You've obviously been doing this pretty long time, because I think I met you in 2007.
I think
or
that's right.
something.
You got a good memory,
And-
yes.
Oh, I still got
does.
it. And you were already hot to trot then. So, real quick, how did you two get into the ballroom dancing?
Well, there's a guy named Dave Lowe who plays the piano, and it was at the old Capri when I happened to walk in.
Oh, that restaurant.
Yes, there was a restaurant, and people would dance around the tables. There wasn't an official dance floor. So we would go there, and all of a sudden, I saw somebody there that looked kind of interesting, and I introduced her, and it was Katrina. And I asked her to dance. And she says, I make it a policy of not to slow dance with strange men.
Oh, gosh.
I said, what? And she said, no, let me rephrase that. To dance with men that I don't know, not strange men. I said, well, okay. So I ended up leaving without dancing with her. And I said to myself, you know what? If we're going to get together, the universe is going to have to bring us together. I'm not going to bother with her again. So the next day, I went to IHOP, the International House of Pancakes. Every Saturday, I met my two sons there, and we would have breakfast. And the next day happened to be Valentine's Day. We were at IHOP with my sons, and as we were leaving, I looked over and I noticed Katrina sitting in a booth. I said, what a coincidence. So I went over and I said, hi. And she looked up, as if I was interfering with her reading the newspaper. I said, well, I'll see you later. She said, oh, no, you can sit down if you want. So she moved the paper, and I said, it's very coincidental because we just met last night, and now it's here. And I said that the universe would need to bring us together if we were to meet. She said, the universe didn't bring us together. She said, I did. She said, a friend of mine told me that you meet your sons here every Saturday morning, and this is the third Saturday I'm here, and it's the first Saturday you saw me.
Yeah, you know what? She's a
wonderful.
tricky one.
She's
a tricky
That
one
is
anyway.
wonderful, though.
And she's tricky.
So I was trapped.
Well, in a good trap.
In a good,
Yeah,
that was
in a
in a
good
good
trap.
trap. Yeah.
In an excellent-
and it all started
excellent
with
trap.
ballroom dancing. Incidentally, very few places can you ballroom dance anymore,
I know.
unfortunately.
I know.
So we go to Dave Lowe, who now plays at Murphy's, and Cool City Band, who plays occasionally at the Jazz Kitchen. But other than that, and that's why it's so important for the Great American Songbook to have that to help to energize that kind of music
I think
again.
there should be more
Right.
of that. People don't dance together that much anymore.
Yes, that's right.
People can go clubbing as they always did,
Yeah.
and they can kids can go clubbing, and
Yeah.
but people dancing together.
Yes.
It's almost like it's becoming a lost art, unfortunately.
That's right.
And I wish there were more of that.
Right.
You know, where you could go hear the band.
Yes.
And go hear the singers, and there would be the supper
Yes.
clubs. That used to be the supper clubs. You'd go and have dinner. You could dance. You
And the
listen to-
romance.
well, it is romantic.
Yeah, and the
you can
romance,
go and
but-
listen to the great music of
And you know
of the
what?
Great American
and you can
Songbook.
listen to people like Cindy Collins,
Oh, no.
Judy Fitzgerald,
I
as
play
we did
dance.
at the Indiana Historical Society that time.
That was a great gig.
There's
that was
not
a great
that many
gig.
opportunities anymore for that type of music.
There's not, and it's unfortunate.
It is.
And I like doing those kinds of gigs because
Yeah.
it's kind of it's reminiscent of the, back in
and the people who
that era.
intend like you to do those kinds of gigs.
I
and
know. I'm only one woman,
I know.
Frank, but.
What
We
a woman.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
And
we
what,
do. That's
and
right.
what
Right.
a man. What a man.
Yeah.
Frank Basile, thank you so much for being here. You are a font of information and always so interesting to listen to your stories.
Right.
I never tire of hearing anything. I'm being totally honest when I say that.
Well, thank
And,
you. And you
Truly.
you've helped and encouraged me to do that.
Oh, listen,
I love this show,
thank you.
and I recommend this to other people.
Well, if it-
Not
if it wasn't
necessarily
for
this
this
one,
man,
but
I might-
all of the other ones that you do.
Really, I might not be here if it wasn't for this man.
No,
Truly.
yeah. I mean, everybody needs a helping hand. That's what I would say. Everybody, even if you're a hard worker, everyone needs help.
And
You
that-
don't get
yeah,
anywhere without other
absolutely.
people helping you.
And that's like this brother Amity did for my speaking.
Yes.
And Gene Glick and so on and so
And what
forth.
you've
We all
done
need
for
that.
the arts here, for the performing arts, I'll tell you, your name, Frank and Katrina Basile, your name is on so many venues.
The Basile Gallery, where I went to school, walking
Right, well,
past every single
and
day.
the Indiana
you know?
Historical Society, the theater is named after you down there. You have your name up here on the in the Palladium, a million other different places, and that I'm not mentioning. But
But you know, it's a pleasure for us to have had the opportunity to do those things. As I've told the Association of Fundraising Professionals at a meeting, I said, you know what? You, the fundraisers, sponsor dinners and everything to thank the donors. I really think the donors should be thanking you for presenting you with the opportunity to spend your money for things outside of yourself that help the community, instead of bigger cars and bigger houses and
right.
everything else.
yeah,
It's an
you're-
appreciated perspective.
Well,
That's
you're
right.
Well, and what
Without
you are.
fundraisers, we wouldn't know about these things.
Right.
Well, what you are is you're a prime example of giving back. You really have given back tenfold, and you've taken your money that you, my God, that you have made, and you have given it back to the arts, and it's so important. And you're right. A lot of people do that, but a lot of people don't, and they do spend it on very materialistic things, and we are, as you should do what you want with your money. I'm not advocating anybody should do anything else but what they want to do with their money. But thank you for
We're
doing that
grateful.
with your money.
Very grateful.
I'll leave you with this quote from Gene Glick, who quoted Andrew Carnegie, who said, if you die with a lot of money in your account, you die in disgrace. And Glick says, because you should give it away before you die. Because why have it with you then to be taxed and everything else? But in any event,
Can't take it with you.
you can't take it with you. That's right.
All right. Frank, thank you.
Thank
you,
you.
Thank you so much.
Scott,
you're,
Cindy.
you're
Yeah.
fantastic, as
care.
always. And thank you so much for joining us for this episode of No Title Needed. Scott, where are we?
Blessed to be here. Truly.
Yeah, come on over and see a cabaret. It's an excellent, excellent space, a wide variety of entertainment, and some really wonderful artists. Lovely venue, really unique and intimate. So thank you for joining us. Thank you again, Frank. Cynthia Collins.
Scott Osborne.
Oh, I'm glad you know your name finally. And we'll see you next time on No Title Needed.